He didn't need a gun to steal a fortune, just a clipboard, a union card, and the power to decide who worked tomorrow. If you love true stories about power, corruption, and the shadow empires that built America, make sure to follow, because this one starts at the edge of the sea and ends in the hands of the mob. New York Harbor. October 3, 1939. 6:45 a.m. Fog drifts between the cranes along Pier 51. Cargo nets rise from the holds of freighters. Men in worn coats wait behind a chain-link fence for the hiring boss to call their names. They're longshoremen, the muscle that moves the city's food, fuel, and goods. One man decides who works and who goes hungry, the hiring stevedore. And behind him stands the Mafia. The docks are chaos. No schedules, no contracts, no guarantees. Work is assigned day by day through a system called the shape-up. Hundreds of men gather each morning while foremen choose crews. Bribes, favors, and intimidation rule the process. If you don't pay, you don't work. The longshoremen call it the insurance. Control of that system belongs to the International Longshoremen's Association, ILA, the union representing waterfront labor from Maine to Texas. But by the late 1930s, the ILA's New York locals are infiltrated by mobsters from Brooklyn and Manhattan. Their influence begins with Joseph P. Ryan, the ILA's powerful president. Ryan is not a gangster, but he turns a blind eye to gang control in exchange for loyalty and dues money. The man enforcing that control on the piers is Albert Anastasia, a future underboss of the Gambino crime family. Anastasia started as a real longshoreman on the Brooklyn waterfront. By 1937, he commands absolute fear. Known among dockworkers as the executioner, he uses muscle from Murder, Inc. to eliminate rivals. His office at the Union Hiring Hall becomes the nerve center for Mafia power over the harbor. Anastasia's influence spreads through the Brooklyn docks, the Chelsea piers, and the Hudson River terminals. He installs loyal stevedores and union officials who pay weekly envelopes to him and his superiors. Every crate unloaded, every truck loaded pays tribute. If a company refuses, goods go missing in transit. The numbers are staggering. In 1940, more than 60% of all imports to the United States pass through New York Harbor. Control of the docks means control of the nation's economy. The Mafia doesn't need to own the ships. It owns the men who move them. Workers fear speaking out. A union delegate who complains about missing funds is found floating near Pier 7. Another disappears after refusing to collect dues for a mob-run local. Police treat each case as an accident. The code of silence, y omerta, extends to the piers. When the United States enters World War II in 1941, the docks become critical infrastructure. The Navy fears sabotage by Axis agents, but official investigations reveal a different threat. Organized crime already controls the waterfront. In 1942, the U.S. Office of Naval Intelligence makes a secret deal with imprisoned mob boss Lucky Luciano. The arrangement, codenamed Operation Underworld, uses Luciano's connections to guarantee labor peace and protect ships from sabotage. In return, Luciano receives better prison conditions and eventual release. The partnership cements the Mafia's influence on the docks, now legitimized under wartime necessity. When the war ends, that power remains. Anastasia, now a national crime figure, strengthens his hold through the ILA locals. He partners with Anthony Tough Tony Anastasio, his brother and a key union officer at the Brooklyn waterfront. Together they merge Mafia rackets with union business. Trucking contracts, stevedore assignments, and pension funds all move through mob channels. By 1946, longshoremen's pay envelopes include deductions for dues, dock insurance, and special contributions, all routed through mob collectors. A man who refuses payment doesn't unload cargo again. Companies that complain face delays, theft, or vandalism. The waterfront becomes a closed system where the Mafia sets prices, wages, and access. The Genovese family joins the racket. Vincent the Chin Gigante, then an enforcer, works under mob boss Vito Genovese to extend control from Manhattan's West Side piers to New Jersey terminals. The Gambinos and Genoveses agree to divide the harbor. Brooklyn for Gambino, Manhattan for Genovese. Union meetings turn violent. Election ballots are stuffed. Opponents beaten. A longshoreman who challenges a mob-backed official at Local 791 vanishes 2 days later. His body surfaces near Red Hook. Police rule it drowning. Witnesses refuse to talk. Meanwhile, the Mafia expands into dockside businesses, cafeterias, parking lots, fuel suppliers, and loading equipment rentals. Nothing operates without paying kickbacks. Even stolen cargo becomes a market. Cigarettes, liquor, clothing, and electronics vanish from manifests and reappear in black market warehouses. The FBI estimates annual theft losses at over $10 million by 1949, almost all through mob-connected channels. The corruption is open secret. Newspapers call the waterfront the kingdom of fear. Longshoremen whisper about the button men, meaning killers sent to enforce discipline. But the city government avoids confrontation. The docks are too vital. Then comes Malcolm Johnson, a reporter for the New York Sun. In 1948, he begins investigating waterfront corruption. Over 17 months, Johnson interviews dockworkers, police, and clergy. His exposé, Crime on the Waterfront, publishes in 1949. It documents extortion, violence, and collusion between the ILA and organized crime. The series wins the Pulitzer Prize and shocks the nation. Public outrage forces political action. New York's governor and mayor create the Waterfront Crime Commission in 1951. Hearings expose ILA officials receiving bribes from shipping companies and Mafia intermediaries. Dock workers testify under protection. They describe daily extortion, rigged hiring, and stolen cargo. Under subpoena, ILA President Joseph Ryan denies wrongdoing but admits he cannot control every pier. Investigators reveal that many local union treasurers have ties to known mobsters. One witness, a stevedore named Anthony DeVincenzo, testifies that refusing to pay bribes means no work, no bread. The Commission's final report describes the New York docks as a feudal domain ruled by terror. It names Albert and Anthony Anastasia as primary beneficiaries of racketeering. Yet indictments remain limited. Witnesses recant or disappear. In 1952, film director Elia Kazan and screenwriter Bud Schulberg visit the piers while researching the story. They interview priests from the Seamen's Church Institute, who describe violence and fear among longshoremen. The material becomes the foundation for the 1954 film On the Waterfront, a dramatized version of the true mob-controlled harbor. While the movie captures the heroism of a single man standing against corruption, the real story remains unfinished. The Mafia still owns the docks, and the empire only grows stronger through the 1950s. New York, April 1954, 9 a.m. The movie On the Waterfront premieres at the Astor Theater. Crowds line Broadway. Inside, Marlon Brando's character exposes a corrupt dock union ruled by mobsters. The audience applauds. On the real docks just a few miles away, nothing changes. The same men still control who eats, who starves, and who lives. The publicity from the film and the Waterfront Crime Commission forces reformers to act. That same year, the Waterfront Commission of New York Harbor is created, a joint agency between New York and New Jersey designed to clean up the piers. The commission requires longshoremen to register for work badges, screens union officials for criminal records, and monitors hiring hauls. On paper, it looks like progress. In practice, the Mafia adapts. They learn to work through clean fronts. Instead of visible enforcers, the mob now installs respectable union officers, men with no arrest records but deep loyalties. The influence continues, just quieter. By 1955, Albert Anastasia holds two jobs, head of the Gambino family's enforcement arm and silent partner in half a dozen dockside companies. His brother Anthony Anastasio still serves as vice president of the International Longshoremen's Association, Local 1814, based in Brooklyn. Their partnership turns labor power into business leverage. Every shipment pays tribute. Every truck moving cargo from the docks owes a labor adjustment fee. An FBI report from that year notes, Anastasia controls Pier 42 to Pier 58 through intimidation and corrupt labor officials. Cargo theft and payroll extortion continue under the guise of legitimate union practice. The report remains sealed for years. In 1957, Albert Anastasia is murdered in the barber chair of Manhattan's Park Sheraton Hotel. The hit, ordered by rivals within the Mafia Commission, removes the most feared man on the waterfront. But his death doesn't free the docks, it reorganizes them. Control shifts to the Genovese family, led by Vito Genovese and his powerful lieutenant, Anthony Tony Bender Strollo. The Genovese family sees the docks as both a money source and a political tool. They build alliances with trucking companies, warehouse owners, and city contractors. Bribes move through consulting firms and labor service fees. Federal investigators later describe this as the most sophisticated labor racketeering structure in the United States. In the early 1960s, Anthony "Tough Tony" Anastasia dies. His replacement at Local 1814 is another mob-approved official. The Waterfront Commission continues background checks, but the mob always stays one step ahead. When one frontman gets exposed, another takes his place. Dock theft remains constant. Shipments of whiskey, electronics, and tobacco disappear. Police call them wharf rats. On paper, theft losses are written off as insurance claims. In reality, stolen goods fill warehouses in Brooklyn, Bayonne, and Newark. The profits funnel straight back into the Genovese and Gambino families. By the mid-1960s, the Mafia's control expands beyond the piers. Trucking firms delivering cargo inland are required to pay labor peace money. If they refuse, tires get slashed or cargo goes missing. Port inspectors who interfere find their homes vandalized. The system functions through quiet terror. In 1966, the U.S. Senate's McClellan Committee investigates organized crime's role in labor unions. Testimony from longshoremen and shipping executives reveals that racketeering remains endemic. The committee identifies the Gambino and Genovese families as jointly controlling the New York waterfront. But prosecutions stall. Witnesses are too afraid to appear. Meanwhile, Carlo Gambino, who succeeded Anastasia as boss, prefers diplomacy to blood. He cultivates political contacts, donates to charities, and builds relationships with legitimate shipping companies. Under his leadership, mob control becomes institutionalized. Cargo moves efficiently. No strikes, no slowdowns. As one shipping executive testifies privately, the mob keeps the peace at a price. The price is high. A typical dock worker in 1968 pays weekly insurance to a mob-controlled foreman, $5 to $10 out of every paycheck. Small shipping contractors pay hundreds each month for dock coordination. The money flows upward through layers of intermediaries. In a single year, the FBI estimates, organized crime collects more than $15 million in labor peace fees. Behind the scenes, the Mafia launders these profits through waterfront businesses, towing companies, supply vendors, and food distributors. On the books, everything looks clean. The cash-based economy hides the true flow. In 1970, Congress passes the Racketeer-Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, RICO. For the first time, prosecutors can treat the Mafia's control of the docks as part of an ongoing criminal enterprise. The law allows authorities to charge entire networks rather than individuals. The Waterfront Commission, now armed with RICO, begins coordinated raids. Agents seize union records and subpoena company executives. They find patterns of identical invoices, shell companies billing for equipment rentals that never happened. Some executives cooperate, others suddenly resign. Still, the Mafia's power endures. The Genovese family's waterfront operations fall under the direction of Anthony "Fat Tony" Salerno. In the 1970s, Salerno uses Local 1588 in Bayonne and Local 1814 in Brooklyn to control hiring and kickbacks. The Gambinos retain their share through Paul Castellano, who manages trucking contracts from Staten Island. Together, the families divide the harbor, Brooklyn and Red Hook, Gambino territory. Manhattan's West Side and New Jersey terminals, Genovese territory. Queens and Staten Island depots, shared neutral zones. Each zone operates with military precision. Collectors visit docks every Friday. Envelopes go from stevedores to union halls, from union halls to consultants. Those consultants are mob fronts. The trail ends in cash houses in Brooklyn and Little Italy. The men enforcing the system are veterans, dock foremen turned mob soldiers. Their names fill FBI surveillance logs: Michael Clemente, John Dioguardi, Matthew Ianiello. Each runs his own network, reporting upward to the family consigliere. A 1973 FBI report concludes, "The economic life of New York Harbor remains under the influence of organized crime. Legitimate labor relations have been replaced by a racketeering structure in which Mafia families dictate employment, wages, and contracts. At street level, longshoremen adapt. Some see the mob as protection from arbitrary bosses. Others despise the corruption but stay silent. A dockworker interviewed by the Daily News in 1974 says, "You pay the wise guys because you want to keep working. You don't pay, you're on the bench forever." The decade ends with law enforcement closing in. The FBI installs hidden cameras in ILA offices. The Waterfront Commission intercepts phone calls. Federal prosecutors prepare their cases, but the mob still believes it's untouchable. The docks have been theirs for nearly 50 years, and no one has ever truly taken them back. What they don't know is that the 1980s will bring a new kind of war. Wiretaps, informants, and RICO indictments will finally crack open the waterfront empire that Anastasia built and Gambino perfected. Brooklyn, February 10, 1982. 6:40 a.m., a black sedan idles outside the ILA Local 1814 Union Hall. Inside, a crowd of longshoremen waits for their daily job assignments. At the front table, shop stewards collect envelopes. Each one contains dues, insurance, or donations. The men know what it means. It's the price of working the docks, the same system that's been in place for half a century. What they don't know is that federal agents are watching from across the street. Cameras hidden inside delivery trucks. The FBI and the Waterfront Commission have launched a joint investigation called Operation Dock Sweep. Its target, the Genovese and Gambino families' control of the harbor. By the early 1980s, organized crime has turned the docks into a business empire. Union contracts, construction deals, trucking routes, all run through mob intermediaries. The Gambinos, under Paul Castellano, manage Brooklyn's piers and the loading companies. The Genovese family, under Anthony "Fat Tony" Salerno, controls Manhattan terminals and the New Jersey container ports. The profits come from three streams: kickbacks from shipping companies for labor peace, payroll padding, ghost workers who collect wages for no work, cargo theft, high-value goods disappearing from containers before they clear customs. A confidential FBI memo from 1983 estimates that organized crime pulls $50 million a year from New York Harbor through extortion and fraud. To outsiders, the docks look legitimate. Containerization, the shift to massive cargo boxes, has modernized shipping, but behind the scenes the same men collect the same envelopes. The technology changes. The corruption doesn't. Investigators install wiretaps in payphones near the Union Hall. They intercept conversations coded with words like coffee money and parking receipts. Agents soon identify the hierarchy: collectors, foremen, union officers, and finally the capos. All report to the family conciliary, 1984. The FBI flips a longshoreman named Anthony Scotto Jr., nephew of a powerful ILA official and connected to the Gambino family. He agrees to wear a wire. For months, Scotto records conversations about kickbacks, stolen goods, and payoffs to union officers. The tapes expose the system in detail: fake overtime sheets, rigged bids, and envelopes passed in bar bathrooms. That same year, Anthony "Fat Tony" Salerno becomes a target of the newly formed Organized Crime Task Force, OCTF. Undercover agents photograph him meeting with ILA representatives in midtown cafes. Salerno insists he's a retired businessman. The FBI calls him the most powerful labor racketeer in the United States. 1985. Because the assassination of Paul Castellano outside Sparks' stake. House shocks the Mafia hierarchy. John Gotti takes over the Gambino family. While Gotti focuses on clubs and construction, his underboss Salvatore "Sammy the Bull" Gravano keeps the docks profitable. Gravano later admits that the families treated the harbor like Wall Street. Everything moved through us. Under RICO, prosecutors begin assembling full enterprise cases rather than single indictments. Federal agents trace paper trails, pension fund loans, fake consulting contracts, and cash transactions tied to ILA locals. Each case builds toward one goal: dismantling the Mafia's waterfront machine. 1986. The commission trial brings down the Mafia's governing board. Bosses from the Gambino, Genovese, Lucchese, Colombo, and Bonanno families face charges of racketeering and labor corruption. Among the counts, control of waterfront unions. The trial lasts 18 months. All defendants are convicted. Still, the harbor remains infected. The Genovese family replaces Salerno with new management: Vincent Gigante, operating from Greenwich Village. Gigante directs operations through intermediaries in Local 1804, New Jersey, and Local 1814, Brooklyn. To the FBI, he's the invisible man. The crackdown intensifies in 1988. Operation New Dock results in raids on 11 union offices and 24 arrests. Agents seize cash, ledgers and coded notes. One entry reads, P, $25,000, Tony NJ, Labour Peace. It links directly to Salerno's network. Throughout the early 1990s, federal prosecutors pursue case after case. The government uses insider witnesses, disillusioned longshoremen, accountants, even mob soldiers. Each confirms what investigators already know. The docks have operated as a criminal syndicate since the EI 1930s-1992. John Gotti's conviction on RICO charges marks a symbolic turning point. For decades, the mob's control of the waterfront depended on fear and silence. Now informants talk freely. Gravino's testimony describes how the Gambinos used longshoremen's pension funds to buy real estate and trucking firms. The docks were our bank, he says on the stand. By 1995, the FBI and Waterfront Commission report a 60% drop in dockside thefts. Many ILA locals come under federal trusteeship. Background checks remove hundreds of officials with mob ties. The old shape-up system disappears, replaced by computerized hiring. But even in decline, traces of the old order linger. Investigations in 1997 reveal Genovese associates still collecting bribes from small shipping firms. The sums are smaller, the methods quieter. As one retired agent says, the mob doesn't leave, it adapts. At the same time, the shipping industry changes. Containerization consolidates cargo into giant terminals in Newark, Elizabeth, and Staten Island, far from the crowded piers of Manhattan. The new ports are fenced, surveilled, and union oversight is stricter. The romantic chaos of the old waterfront fades into history. By the early 2000s, the Mafia's control is mostly symbolic. A few aging figures still draw consulting fees from legacy contracts, but the era of the mob-owned harbor is over. Global shipping conglomerates and federal oversight end what bullets and trials could not. Historians later describe it as one of the longest-running criminal enterprises in American history. Nearly 70 years of hidden control over one of the world's busiest ports, from the 1930s shape-up lines to the 1990s RICO convictions. The system evolved but never really changed. Power, silence, and tribute. For generations of dock workers, it was simply the way things were. You paid, you worked, you survived, and when the cranes finally stopped swinging and the cameras stopped watching, the harbor was quiet again, not clean but changed. The Mafia no longer ruled the waterfront, but its shadow still moved with every tide that hit the New York piers.